Greetings, everybody. I'm Kevin Sabet, the CEO of SAM, Smart Approaches to Marijuana. It's really nice to be with you here on 420. We're going to take back 420 and talk about the truth with regards to marijuana. And I'm so honored to be joined by my friend, a colleague, co-founder of SAM, honorary chair of Smart Approaches to Marijuana. Can you believe that was 13 years ago, more than 13 years ago that it was started.
Thank you, Kevin, for your getting us all together and really making this happen. It's amazing what's happened in the last decade and change. When you think of all that you kind of predicted might happen. Wow.
We wanted to be wrong. This was a time where my wife knows I usually want to be right, but in this regard, we wanted to be wrong, but we weren't. And but I do feel like there's a beginning of a bit of a backlash that I wanted to talk about. So it's great to be with all of you. There's so much stuff out there right now with regards to this issue. It's kind of blown up marijuana in the last 6 months. You have in February the New York Times saying it's time to admit America has a marijuana problem, which we never thought they would say. It was remarkable what they did. You have the Trump administration trying to plow through a rule that would allow any kind of CBD product, even with THC, so even the intoxicating stuff, where we have no idea what's in it, through a government-funded program. We've actually, as Sam, as you know, we've sued to stop that until the rules are followed. We at least want them to follow the rules. I think that's important. And then we're on the cusp of a major class action lawsuit with 1,000 plaintiffs. These are 1,000 families that have been hit by schizophrenia, psychosis, suicide, addiction, uncontrollable vomiting, the hyperemesis syndrome, all the things that we knew were going to happen increased with legalization. Now there's a class action lawsuit with all of these, big plaintiffs' attorneys now coming on board. So there's just so much that's been happening, and I just kind of wanted to reflect on a little bit of that with you, and just kind of how you feel. First of all, the country is now dealing with the marijuana issue. It sort of seems to be, in some ways, a step forward, a step back. I don't know what you're seeing.
Well, I love that Sam has really pulled together the expert scientists, the leading neuroscientists, the leading pediatricians, all the developmental experts to talk about brain development, the fact that marijuana is not the marijuana that everyone understood it to be a generation ago. It's a whole different thing. We call it marijuana, but it doesn't reflect anything that anyone understands as the way we understood marijuana. I mean, this is really poisonous stuff for so many for whom they may be predisposed to addiction or predisposed to psychosis. And with this potency out there, they're finding themselves triggered into both a cannabis use disorder and psychosis, frankly. Right. And the tragedies that you have helped share with the American public about what really lies behind this false notion that there's nothing harmful about this. This is kind of medicinal. There's something natural about this. And there's something totally unnatural about the fact that cannabis use disorder is skyrocketing as a diagnosis in this country, in the mental health and addiction world, which is what I work on principally. And so just to echo what we were talking about when we started, Sam, we have a major mental health crisis in this country. We have a huge addiction crisis. We just got through with this huge case too with Meta and the social media of our kids suffering at the hands of unscrupulous industry that knew what they were doing with their algorithms and yet told us that this would not be harmful to kids. And so I just want the public to understand the framing here. We're not just talking about marijuana. No. We're talking about unscrupulous addiction for profit industries. You substitute social media, substitute sports betting, substitute marijuana, you name it. It doesn't matter what it, of course, we're focused on marijuana, all the specific issues that come with it, but just for the framing, for the general public, we're dealing with a threat to our public health. And it's not just the substance that's being sold, it's the whole economic apparatus that is profiting off of the suffering of people with addiction. I just want everyone to know this is not just a marijuana issue. This is about an industry that is not interested in the public health. Just like Meta and the social media companies, we're just interested in getting more eyeballs, getting more time of eyes on the screen, locked in. We could just do away with this kind of philosophical, attitudinal, is the leaf itself. Let's just take that aside for a second. Let's just understand the real issue here is that you've got a corporate mentality that's all about maximizing profits. And the only way you do that is you get more people to use your product.
That's right.
Now, the fact is we're talking about a product today that is exponentially more potent than anything we saw in the past. So this notion of it being harmless is obviously, no longer a fair argument, because they're talking about a totally different drug with the potency that we're seeing with THC in the marijuana products that are available today. But the main point is that if an industry is interested only in how much they make, they're going to make whatever they can through whatever means they can. And that comes at any price to the public health.
No, definitely. And I think what's an important point to be made as well is that these industries created this product. Now, some people say, wait a minute, marijuana's been around for thousands of years and whatnot. Our forefathers were planting hemp. Okay, sure. But today's marijuana, as you said, it's been genetically bred, and it's being delivered in ways with these waxes and vapes that can be up to, they claim 99% THC, almost completely pure THC, the candies, all the kid-friendly colored items. This stuff was actually created as part of this addiction for profit, scheme to make it more palatable. Because, interestingly, smoking, of course, has gone down. I mean, smoking in general is not a fashionable way to ingest drugs anymore. And, you would have thought we would also have learned from our experience with big tobacco. But after, a century of that, we've sort of begun to learn about that, and so about tobacco specifically. But even with tobacco, the cigarette was invented by this industry. Tobacco use was, ceremonial and part of our culture for thousands of years. Why didn't we see lung cancer as a leading cause of death in 1600? I mean, 65% of anybody who owned property, I think it was between 65 and 85% of men who owned property, were regular pipe tobacco smokers. I mean, this was as regular as drinking water. Why didn't we see that? Because this product of the cigarette, which was invented in the late 19th century, that added nicotine and a whole host of other things to make it attractive, easy to ingest. You didn't have to fill an old pipe and go and get it and leaf it and make sure the pipe was clean. And you didn't have to do that. This was filtered even for you, which makes it sound healthy. The tobacco industry invented, I have to remind people, they invented the cigarette. They invented what's killing, still today, people are shocked to hear it, 460,000 Americans every year. That's in 2026, not 1986. And that was invented by this industry. So the marijuana industry similarly has invented all of these products. If it wasn't for the legalization, we wouldn't actually have that. Now, I'm not saying we wouldn't have marijuana use. Of course we would. There would always be a group of people using, but it would have been using the stuff that we've been using for centuries actually, which is basically 0 to 7% THC, not 77%, 97%. So that, I think, is the point, is that these companies created these platforms that were specifically addictive with specific algorithms. We had messaging boards before. I remember that in the late 90s. We had dial-up internet. You could chat with people. You could post something. It was primitive, but we had it. It wasn't the addictive nature because it was so primitive. It wasn't so easily available and easily delivered like it is now. And I think that's what people have to remember, is that when you commercialize something in this country, in our country, which is not a socialist country, it's not a country, we don't do nonprofit cooperatives for addictive, profitable items. We just don't. And that's really what we're dealing with here, is this industry that's created this stuff. And that's why I think the fact that there's this this huge lawsuit that's going to go forward, this could really be a game. I don't know, it could not be a game changer, but it's the first time that we're seeing it.
Well, I think that you're seeing a great distrust on both sides of the aisle against corporate corruption of the public interest.
That's
you're seeing, big food corporations that have been investing addictive attributes into the food that we eat to get us to consume more against our better.
Your cousins were talking about that a lot.
Nature, and then you've seen the criticisms of big pharma.
Right.
I'm just saying it's interesting that we're living in a time where there is more suspicion about corporate kind of seizing the public health.
Yes.
So I think whether or not this class action goes anywhere, it comes at a time where it's going to resonate with the American public. What I really think is we're also seeing the fact that you have a confluence of events with kids with record rates of anxiety and depression, because a lot of that's fueled by the social media addiction. So you got these poor kids getting ping-ponged back and forth because we as adults, the trustees of our kids, the people that are supposed to be protecting them, have abandoned our responsibility to the next generation by allowing these for-profit industries to come in and pick these kids off, take them hostage. You know, we in America don't want any of our Americans taken hostage. Like we were just talking about those down airmen, and the president took so much pride, as we all did, when we were able to retrieve them, because last thing we want to do is leave them in dangerous places. We leave our kids in dangerous places every single day through our policies that make them have to walk by these pot shops and make them have technology that's so ubiquitous, and then say it's their fault when we as adults permitted this. But the fact that we have seen this anxiety rate as a result of the social isolation and disconnection because of technology, and then what a kid's going to do? They're going to look for relief. You're anxious. Wow, guess what? We got a new product for you. It will make you feel better. The idea that, I mean, you could be conspiratorial about that, that marijuana came right on the heels of this anxiety crisis and provides an easy way for kids to self-medicate, which of course then only enhances the layering of wiring in their brain for addiction. Addiction is a disease that underpins whatever the substance is. And frankly, doesn't matter the substance is marijuana or alcohol or opioids.
So pleasure centers in the brain.
It centers in the brain, and it's those tracks that we're learning that behavioral health addictions like sports betting, like social media, it's all the same. And America's coming to this realization. And so I think that there's a lot of interest in being healthier, thinking about what we eat, thinking about how drinking alcohol's gone down dramatically. I just think that the marijuana industry is not where they were when we started, Sam, and where they could hide behind, you know, their representation of what the reality was when they knew full well what was coming, because they had it in their plan. But they didn't want anyone else to know. In fact, they were, in a very cynical way, kind of exploiting the terrible tragedy of our criminal justice system and exploiting that for their for-profit goals by taking a very legitimate issue, which is the over-incarceration of communities of color in our prison system, and saying that that was the reason we should commercialize this product. Like, which, by the way, they end up putting 13 times more in black neighborhoods than white neighborhoods. How funny is that? That they're somehow on this social justice mission. They want to help.
And who's making money from this, too? What do they look like, right? I mean, clearly.
It's a farce. And it's really one of the terrible injustices of this, that they have managed to take some very legitimate concern for how our criminal justice system operates and actually make it more cynical by exploiting the legitimate concern, but exploiting it with no intention of trying to address it, with all intention to try to profit from it.
Right.
And as you said, the arrest rates in, states like Colorado, they didn't go down. They've gone up for black people.
Right.
Again, such a obvious way of showing how false these advertisements were on their part.
Well, it's interesting to see now, again, to look back from where we were. So I think about, there were, like you said, and there were legitimate criticisms of the criminal justice system. We were sometimes giving people criminal records for a joint in their pocket, or we were using that as a pretext for something, much more cynical. And so there were obviously thoughtful people thinking about this. I'm thinking of, for example, Michelle Alexander, who wrote that seminal book, The New Jim Crow, that was really about how, drug laws have been one of the main things, a sort of a new Jim Crow. And it sort of implied in there was a lot about marijuana. And, I could tell after, I'm just sharing this personal story, I could tell after reading that, and this, by the way, of course, as you remember, this became kind of the clarion call for a lot of legalization groups that did claim to be about social justice. Hey, look at this. This very well-respected scholar wrote this book. This is the drug laws, the marijuana laws are the new Jim Crow. I engaged with her. I talked to her. We actually happen to have some mutual friends, coincidentally. And I said to her, great book. I didn't agree with all of it, but your point is well taken. However, have you seen this side of the marijuana legalization debate? The fact that this is for profit, the fact that this is 8 times as many pot shops in poor communities of color. The fact that if you're a young black man now, you're 2.5 times more likely to use than a young white man, which was not the case before legalization, but it is the case because of the exploitation now. And to her credit, she very much engaged and said, I want to see the data. She looked at it and she was astounded by it. She hadn't heard of that. And honestly, since she wrote that book, I haven't heard a peep from, she was the golden child for the social justice issue just pre George Floyd and really ready from there. And she doesn't talk about that anymore because I think she's seen that. Frankly, I even give credit to, our old foes, but the main legalization groups like the Drug Policy Alliance, who were always, they were the ones who set the foundation for legalization. They got the AIDS activists and the billionaires together, the medical people, the libertarians, the liberals on the left. They had the big tent issue. Ethan Nadelman famously said, we are the people that hate drugs. We're the people that love drugs. I mean, he had this beautiful way, even though I totally disagree with him, of getting people under his tent, getting people fired up about this injustice. Big TED Talk. I think it's had 20 million views on the injustice of the drug war. Even you go to their website now, you go to their messaging about marijuana, you would think it was our messaging. They just put out a one-pager on the harms of high-potency THC marijuana. They have a whole thing on cannabis hyperemesis syndrome. They have a whole thing on schizophrenia and psychosis. When they talk about legalization now, they say, we want to do legalization the right way because what's been done so far essentially is the wrong way. Admitting that, even the people that are so institutionally tied with these points of view, I think it's just, if you're somewhat of an honest broker, you cannot deny what's happening. And again, the New York Times coming back from, not taking my calls, hanging up on me, finally inviting me to an ed board meeting in 2019, laughing me out of the room, publishing editorial after editorial about how marijuana is harmless and it's medicine. And, the real progressive view is to legalize marijuana. And then now to say, it's time to admit we have a problem. The change actually has been dramatic.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
Right?
Really, to your credit, to so many people's credit, all those families across America who've come forward telling the real story. You can't argue with those personal experiences that families have come forward with.
Those have been incredible. Actually, you remind me, it's a basis for the film that's finally coming out today, 420. Is on the Documentary Plus channel, which everybody can get free with Apple TV or Roku. And it's THC Inc. is the film. For those of you, THC Inc., you can check it out. But it's following these families. And it's put out by Wayfarer Studios. And we're very excited that finally, after so many years of working on it, it's coming out. But it's talking about these stories. It's pairing the data with, these stories that we're hearing from these families. And, in a way that if you think about like the documentary Screenagers that came out a few years ago about kids with screens, and you think about Jonathan Haidt's work with the Anxious Generation, and Jonathan's told me, he said, I'm very interested in the marijuana issue. I think it's a contributory factor to what we're seeing with kids. We're hoping THC Inc. will have some kind of impression, leave some kind of impression to further this so that we can wake up. Because it seems like we have to burn our hand on the stove to be convinced that the stove is on. And it's like, how can we, whether it's social media, the sports betting, marijuana, I mean, it's like, what can we do to, and I'd actually be curious about what, One Mind and Kennedy Forum, what they're doing to, stop it so we don't have to burn our hand to realize the stove is on.
Yeah, well, we ultimately need to prepare our kids how to manage in a very toxic, stressful world where, as I said, they have to run this gauntlet. In the military, they have to go through all this obstacle training in order to manage a potential battlefield scenario.
Physical
issues.
But,
it's not just the physical obstacles they have to run through. The Green Berets have some of the most rigorous psychological training in order to prepare to be a special operator. Because it's not just how many pull-ups and push-ups and how's your target practice. It's whether you can go into an environment and be able to shut down all the intrusive thoughts and focus on the mission. Because if you can't focus on the mission and are distracted by your own internal noise in your head with these intrusive thoughts, you could jeopardize the mission. So they actually train, these special operations. You say to yourself, why would anybody like a Green Beret need mental health? Well, they look at mental health completely different from generally what the public does. And that is they see it as a force multiplier, meaning it's a lever to expand their opportunities to perform at a higher level. We need to move from just this dysfunction attitude, like let's try to mitigate all the harmful impacts of all of these assaults on our kids, from marijuana, sports betting, social media, and you name it. We need to start to prepare our kids. How are they going to face this world? And learning the skills, like the Green Berets do, of how to manage their own internal thinking and feelings. It's a skill. And like any other skill, like working out physically,
it takes practice.
You could actually work to build the ability for you to not get triggered by what is coming in and assaulting your well-being. I think that ultimately, like STEM education was for our kids 30 years ago, where the corporate world said, oh my God, our kids are not good at science, technology, engineering, math. We need to revamp our education system. Today, corporate America is looking, we don't have employees that can pay attention at work.
Or pass the drug test.
Pass the drug test.
Right. But pay attention.
Pay attention.
On social media the whole time, actually.
Social media, all of it is impeding our competitiveness as a nation.
Yeah.
And this is not some esoteric, do-gooder over here, trying to take on drugs. No, this is about us as a nation.
We want to do well.
Can the military perform?
We want to do well.
Can our economy perform? And we're coming into an era, Kevin, where our brain capacity is at a premium. Now with AI, the only way to really manage and excel with AI is to have the brain skills, the capacity to manage the evolving and changing skill development necessary to manage this very complex world, which means we got to be on the ball.
Yeah.
And if people are not on the ball, AI is going to pose a major threat.
Yeah.
So we've got a compounding impact. Marijuana industry has jeopardized our young people's ability to succeed and perform. It's compounded with social media, doubled down with sports betting. And now AI is going to put challenges on these kids. And they're going to be even less equipped to deal with this most disruptive period in history, they say, since the Industrial Revolution. In fact, They say it's going to be an order of magnitude far greater in terms of disruption in our economy. So you think of all that stress. If we don't give our kids the right skills to manage, like the Green Berets, basic training, how to go through this gauntlet, we're going to be letting them down. And, I'm hoping from this ultimate social media, I think, settlement, there's going to be maybe a major settlement like Purdue Pharma on marijuana, probably be one with Meta, the social media. It's probably going to dwarf, frankly, it's going to probably dwarf what we saw with Purdue and tobacco.
Too.
We need to think of how do we want some of the punitive damages, where do we want those dollars to go? Because it won't just be the plaintiffs, the school districts, the moms, the tragedies who need to be, compensated. But it's the society at large.
Yeah, right.
And I love the fact that Sam has really given some thought to how should we structure what that settlement looks like.
Right.
So that we're not stuck like we were with tobacco and Purdue, where we're scrambling. We don't have a good sense of public health, mitigation strategies. We have a chance to do that now, and I'm so proud that Sam is already ahead of the game, like Sam has been from the beginning in the thought leadership. It's nice now that you got all these normals and all these groups now parroting Sam, but they're still behind the times. I just want to echo to our friends out there, there's still so much thought leadership that needs to occur as we navigate what's going to happen. Because like you said, this is not going away, tragically. More people are going to be victimized by this. How do we make the best of whatever the situation is today, as destructive as it is, with all of the things we're still fighting? We need a multi-pronged approach. And you've been fighting this at the state level. You've been fighting this, as you said, at the federal level, in Congress, in the administration. It's really impressive how many different ways that you've tackled, this agenda. And I don't know if as many people out there know how much more complex the battle is. It's not just, trying to take on one aspect of this. This is such a multi-pronged effort. To talk a little bit about, how so many strategies are kind of have to converge at once while we're trying to, block the rescheduling, while we're trying to get these states from, even legalizing these new psychedelics. Let's add more fuel to the fire.
Talk about new
a little bit about how Sam
You're making me nervous. All this stuff. You're bringing up all the things. It's a lot. No, it's what we're doing every day. And we have a great team. That's why, they make me look good and they make our organization, a field, look good. No, it's multiple fires at once while trying to be on offense. So just think about one of these fires is this issue with hemp, which is something that it's the last thing we want to be talking about. I mean, hemp was a niche market that was 0.00001% of the fiber market in this country about 10 years ago. You could the necklaces at the mall or they were all imported from China and Canada. Nobody was worried about anybody smoking hemp because you couldn't smoke it at all. It wasn't a big deal. Well, now that's in our lap because innovative chemists and for-profit industries have figured out how to grow the hemp plant in a way that essentially mimics the marijuana plant and extract CBD, add a little THC in there too, and then add a whole new intoxicating element that we never knew existed, which is one delta different than the THC that we're talking about. So that's delta 10 instead of the normal THC, which is actually delta 9. 10 deltas instead of 9. I mean, it's crazy. Think of the 10 deltas making us, extremely paranoid, intoxicated, violent, aggressive. I mean, the things that it does to the brain and those receptors. And, taking that because of a loophole in the Farm Bill from Mitch McConnell's bill and now marketing that all across the country. And that's what we're dealing with now. And now there are 8 years later, there are whole businesses around this who are giving money to politicians in places like Texas, of all places. I mean, the governor of Texas, so you would think we wouldn't have to convince that, maybe being anti-drug is a good idea, who is totally on the side of these hemp farmers as an agricultural commodity when over 85% of what they're producing is messing with kids' brains. 12-year-olds can get it at a gas station, from Plano. And we think that San Francisco is the problem. No, these states are, Alabama, Mississippi. That's one aspect that frankly could consume us entirely. It's 50 states. It's 50 governors. It's a congressional bill that we did get the loophole filled, but now the industry's working overtime to delay and to overturn that because they're supposed to be off the shelves in November, which was a great testament to our government affairs team and our people writing members of Congress. Trump had to sign the bill because it was part of the opening of the government. So and Mary Miller, Representative Miller, and other members of Congress from both sides of the aisle worked very hard on that. But that's just one little aspect, which is actually a huge fire. And, then we have the psychedelics issue, as you bring up. So it's the same story. You take a drug, and the class of drugs in this case, that may very well have medical potential. I'm the first one to say, if we can get elements of these so-called psychedelic drugs through the FDA proper clinical trials, which, by the way, we can do. I mean, many of these drugs are being studied today. There's a huge interest from Silicon Valley to private philanthropy on the right and the left. They're funding hundreds of billions of dollars of research. So there's no excuse that because they're illegal, we can't do the research. There's hundreds of billions of dollars of research.
And they're already molecules going through FDA and stage 2 trials,
stage 2, 3,
that have already shown great efficacy, which use the healthy aspects of the psychedelics to help reduce treatment-resistant depression.
Treatment-resistant depression, maybe even opioid use disorder, maybe PTSD, other things, which is fine.
But you don't leapfrog the regulatory process
and that's what's happening.
Legalize it and then think you're going to be able to, like we've learned with marijuana, put the horse back in the barn. But if we're not effective in advocating for expedited kind of proper oversight and approval of these alternative therapies that show promise, by the way, we could do it to those discrete populations, veterans with trauma, women, victims of trauma. If we're not then they'll be able to do what the marijuana industry did on the criminal justice side.
That's right.
They're going to use them as like our friend Sanjay Gupta did with his weed documentary.
Which I hate to give him extra. His Weed 8 is coming out, by the way. I'm going to give you heartburn any day now about women and weed, by the way, about the wonders of how this could be helpful when we have 70% of medical marijuana shops in Colorado recommending marijuana to pregnant women, even though the research says increased risk of stillbirth, increased risk of premature birth, increased risk of heroin and other drug seeking. So, sorry, Sanjay Gupta is still on that track, by the way. Yeah, our friend. But yes, go on.
He's rolling out those poor kids with epilepsy and saying to protect their health, we're going to jeopardize everyone else's health.
Yeah, no.
Let alone they're actually caring enough about those kids to get them the proper help. Right. I mean, on so many levels.
On so many levels. We have to laugh. If we weren't laughing, we'd be crying. No, it's pretty crazy. And no, definitely on the psychedelic side. And to also admit, and again, for the psychedelic side, there are genuine people that want to see this for those populations.
Yes.
And if they can be done in the proper way with properly trained doctors, not 20 clinics on Venice Beach, not these ketamine clinics that frankly killed our friend Matthew Perry, who's in recovery. I mean, because ketamine is a kind of a dissociative type of psychedelic sort of thing that went through FDA, and there is some proper use in a proper form, but then all these clinics opened up everywhere and they were getting unlimited amounts if you had the money. So we have to do it the right way.
With no therapy.
With no therapy.
And at home.
At home.
Self-monitor.
Right. Self-monitor, no trained doctors, nothing. And it ends in tragedy. So we want to see that
and by the way, so like when it comes to all this stuff with psychedelics, you need to have the therapy part of it. We haven't had that conversation. No. Part of the reason they have been in a real jam because they thought the Trump administration was just going to give this the green light, is that the marijuana experience has poisoned the well for the psychedelic folks.
Yes.
And I keep telling them they need to figure out how they're going to differentiate themselves by how the marijuana folks, because now people have caught on to this idea that you can't willy-nilly convince people that you can do this all on your own and you can just commercialize.
Well, Massachusetts voted against it. Blue state like Massachusetts by a 2-1 margin last year against psychedelic legalization because even Massachusetts saw through that.
Yeah.
By the way, we should also mention, of course, I know dearest state in your heart, will be voting to repeal the commercial sales of marijuana this year in November because, again, the backlash in a state like Massachusetts. And this was started from a person in Cambridge who saw the effects of it from her kid walking by the pot shops all the time. I mean, it's incredible. I wanted to just close with the psychedelics thing is that, the way that they will differentiate from marijuana, if they want to do that indeed, is that they need to separate from the sort of Timothy Leary, LSD type activists and really stick to the science and the evidence. And
That's right.
A lot of the research has been funded by the activists and promoted by them. And one of them was, of course, the MDMA trial for PTSD. And that went all the way to stage 3. But it failed in stage 3. The FDA, on a near unanimous vote, said no because of a lot of issues with safety. But, they didn't just say, all right, we're going to go back to the drawing board and make it right. They started calling foul and saying they're going to go directly to the voters and do that kind of thing. And that's going to poison the well for the legitimate players. And again, the hundreds of billions that are, I know, invested by Silicon Valley, by hedge funds. There's a lot of money in this. And my advice to them is do it the right way. You'll be paid handsomely, but you have to wait.
That's right.
And yes, we can expedite it, but you can expedite it in a responsible way.
That's right.
Not in a way that just says, well, we're just going to leapfrog all these regulations.
You have to have replicable science, meaning the experiment has to be able to be validated following the same replicable science. And
I was checking something because we don't want to be sued as a result, but I want to tell you something. I want to get the number right. So you mentioned the Sanjay Gupta weed thing, which he knows how we feel about it. Certainly know how you feel. If you didn't, wait, Patrick was a superstar and, told him the truth on this, whether he'd like to hear it or not. He didn't like to hear it because he edited it out of Weed 2, which was the second one, but after Weed 1. But the group that was featured in Weed, you remember, was the Charlotte's Web.
Yes.
Right. That's one of the first CBD, and was the Stanley brothers, the bunch of these brothers in Colorado who grew CBD-rich plants, not FDA approved, nothing, got that through. Well, guess what? You're never going to believe it. My staff told me this. I had to double check. Couldn't believe it. Guess who owns 40% of that company currently? I'm going to get it right because I don't want to be sued. British American Tobacco, which makes Lucky Strikes and Dunhills, now own 40% of what was supposed to be a CBD wellness company for little kids with treatment-resistant epilepsy. I mean, that's where this all is. But we're not hearing that from Sanjay Gupta.
No.
We got to call our friend and tell him because this is crazy.
It is. It's unbelievable.
You can't make this up.
No.
And it's exactly the stuff that we predicted. And maybe as we kind of close, we remember a lot for inspiration, for courage. We remember you, but we remember your father and the courage he had to take on big tobacco when everybody seemed to be in the pockets of that. And I didn't ask you this before, and so this is just off the cuff here, but what lessons from what you learned from him and how he took on big tobacco can we take in our fight against big marijuana?
Well, first of all, that was when Democrats were for...
We're anti-big tobacco.
We're anti-big tobacco, and we're not rolling over on behalf of the big marijuana, which is really new big tobacco. And it really is shameful how many Democratic leaders we've seen turn away from the hard evidence and data, which shows that there's no difference in terms of the whole approach to this new big tobacco, which is addiction is at the core, and public health is the loser every single day. I just loved the fact that, environmentalists were all about, protecting the environment, this is a huge threat to the environment. Public health advocates, kids advocates, all against big tobacco. And I recall that when we were starting SAM, it was hard to get a lot of those natural constituencies that should have been with us from the get-go.
Yeah.
Really shocking to me.
Yeah.
Why is that important to answering your question? I don't think it was as easy as it looks going back in time and thinking about what Henry Waxman and Ted Kennedy and others were doing, Orrin Hatch. It looks like it should have been an easy fight, but there was a point where that could not have been easy.
No.
But it happened, and it happened like
quick.
that.
Yes.
And so I think we're going to have a reckoning. And all of this work, trying to elevate this issue, educate the public, prepare people with the facts, bring in the experts, all of that is going to have a cumulative effect, and that's going to happen suddenly. I really think maybe it's this class action lawsuit. Maybe it's that class action lawsuit after the class action on Meta, and the concern about sports betting and predictive. There's just a moment now where I think people are really waking up. They have to be really on their toes about who's selling them what and what their true intentions are.
I agree. I think all these pressures together, it's like this pressure cooker when you put all this together, especially for parents. I mean, I got to share this. I was at a academic roundtable at a major university last week, and the head of it, who's a very well-respected, endowed professor and, sort of like the prototypical professor, academic type, I'm sure sort of left-leaning politically, approached me quietly and said, you guys are the ones that are doing this repeal in Massachusetts. So it was in Massachusetts. I'm giving away where it was. It was in Massachusetts. And I said, yes. And he said, and I was getting ready. I'm getting ready for the pushback. I'm getting ready for the, are you being paid by Big Pharma? Or which makes no sense, but people say that. Or are you, what do you have against this? And social, or I
dark money.
Yeah, dark money. Yeah, all the dark money we get from the, these poor parents that have lost kids that are trying to help us. Yeah. Anyway, and I was getting ready for that. And he said, I want to write an op-ed for you on this. And so I was taken aback, and I said, wow, thank you, Professor. Why? Can I just ask why? Why is this something that, because, in the meeting, we weren't talking about this. It was sort of about other issues, a little bit, but it was a lot. It was about all kinds of issues, why I was there as an academic thing. And he said, because it's hard enough raising 3 kids now between the betting, because, by the way, gambling is for 16-year-old boys now, from what I'm hearing in places like Concord, Mass, upper class places, Newton, these kinds of places, they're worried about their 16-year-old boys. Poker nights are back. I mean, gambling is back in a traditional way, not even just the sport, it's both. Anyway, he said between gambling, sports betting, social media, now marijuana, it's like we need fewer things as parents to be worrying about. And if we can take out these pot shops that are everywhere, that promised us gold falling from the sky, promised us new schools and new playgrounds, and has given us nothing but basically smelling like a skunk all the time everywhere, our streets, and kids dropping out left and right, of just dropping out of life, I want to help you. And that was amazing. That told me, again, reinforced from the New York Times, reinforced from our old foes and what they're saying, reinforced from all these, people that are finally kind of turning to the Titanic, and you kind of feel is just like starting to begin that U-turn. It was pretty amazing to hear that from it.
Well, I have 5 kids, one going to college now.
Wow, I can't believe
D1, University of Washington, Coxon, incredible. But the other kids, younger, obviously, elementary school, I tell them all about my own recovery, and I'm talking to them all the time about being positive in what they're doing for other people during the day. Tell me what you've done for someone else.
Gratitude.
Gratitude. We talk about, the spirituality of life and how much God helps us in our lives, and to be looking for God's help. Anyway, I feel like my kids are just getting something that a lot of kids don't get because we don't have a culture of helping to educate them about their minds and what we're feeding their minds. They're getting fed all this addictive stuff, plus all this toxic political strife and a toxic world of war and destruction,
divisiveness,
and
us v them, constant.
I mean, I really think like we're gonna need to bolster our kids, support them, understand. You know, they say that you know, if you've got a negative and a positive, and it's like the devil. And
the
angel, and they're fighting, you know, and it's like two dogs, you know, which one wins? And they say the one that you feed.
Cool.
And if you're feeding the negative, if you're feeding the evil, if you're feeding the stuff that's going to eat you alive, you're going to get eaten alive. And if you're helping to reinforce what's positive, what's able to help you throughout life, that's going to be what wins over down the line. And I see my kids and I see my kids' friends, and I am just so fortunate to be in recovery, to be able to just socialize what recovery looks like, because the lessons of recovery are really public health lessons, but you don't often in our society learn about addiction until after the fact. We have to educate people before the fact and not just wait for us to pass a law to prohibit or to try to regulate or to try to keep this thing. Well, we have to do all of that. But part of our mission at SAM is also to get a public health message out there and to promote those things that are going to be sustaining at a time when we need our brains more than ever before. We cannot. It is against our national interest as a country to have these marijuana companies taking our kids hostage. We would never allow the enemy to take our kids and imprison them. But that's what the marijuana industry is doing. Taking our kids, social media, taking our kids' brains hostage for their for-profit interests. And our kids are suffering. They're behind those lines. They're prisoners in their minds because of addiction that we've encouraged. And it's a travesty. They are not patriots.
Right.
They're not doing anything to help our country. We need a new patriotism that's about building a stronger country and world. And we got to know who's on our side for our kids and who the enemy is. And I hate to put it in such stark terms, but if it's your kids, when we were going to have a pot shop in my neighborhood, I marched all my kids down, and I made sure my local elected officials knew that they were not going to be able to do this without consequences, because I, for one, was going to do everything I could to fight any one of them that decided to vote for this. And we need more of that attitude, frankly, around the country. And Sam, I'm proud to say, is educating parents and communities, with CADCA partnerships and others, how to have them be able to stand up for their own family members. Those parents are terrified about what's going to happen to their kids because they don't control what's going on around those kids all the time.
No.
They need to feel some agency that they can do something to protect those kids. And we're giving them the tools to know we can't solve all the challenges that you're facing, but here are some ways that you can make a difference as an advocate.
Yeah.
And you don't have to just throw up your hands and say, the world is beyond my control. No, there are ways that you can help change the world for the better on behalf of our kids, on behalf of our public health, so that we're not consigned to a nation where generation after generation we're seeing higher suicide, higher overdose, and just generally speaking, higher suffering as a result of depression, anxiety, addiction. These are the illnesses of the young.
Yes.
And we're all consumed about Alzheimer's, as we should. It's going to be a major challenge to our budget. But it's these illnesses of addiction and psychosis that take our kids hostage. You know, end of life, it's a tragedy to have your brain give out on you. Young people having their brains give out on them because we have these unscrupulous industries that are addiction for profit, who are taking our kids hostage to their for-profit bottom line, caring nothing about their future, their lives, their capabilities, wasting it all because their product is going to compromise their well-being. We got to be really laying down a moral marker here. I mean, this is not okay. This is not some benign, opposing special interest group. I mean, this is not us. No. This is about right and wrong. I mean, this is not with Sam and big marijuana. No, this is about right and wrong for our kids. Yeah,
and that's the thing, is they get to ride, the marijuana folks get to ride this reputation of the past of it being this harmless thing, and what it was with the 2% THC. When the levels we're seeing now, you know, the psychosis and the violence, I mean, which is never something we would associate with marijuana, the levels we're seeing of psychosis and violence as a result of today's high potent marijuana is just, it's such a huge change in such a small amount of time. I don't know where there's a parallel. It's incredible. And it's going to take an entire, that's what we're trying to do, re-education effort of lawmakers who are afraid to do the right thing, parents who are afraid to say anything because, again, they used it 30 years ago, so are they being hypocritical? These are the challenges that we're seeing every day.
Well, congratulations on your book.
Thank you.
One Nation Under the Influence.
Thank you.
Such a powerful title.
Thank you.
And in my book, Profiles of Mental Health Courage, I talk about people's journeys trying to grapple with suffering from a mental health or addiction crisis, and affects the whole family. That's what I really dig into with this story, is that it's not just the individual, it's their whole family that suffers. So this is not just about this idea that it's just one person and it's their civil liberty to be able to do it. Because when they suffered, they're bringing down a whole family. And this is not benign. That it's not the free market, people choosing. They've lost the power of choice in an addictive product that is deliberately taking their choice away from them through the very nature of the addiction that they're promoting through their product.
Well, we're so lucky to have you in this fight, Patrick, and as a friend, so grateful for your friendship and leadership. And you know, Bob DuPont says a lot of sage, wise things. But one of the things he says, and I think of you often, is addiction is the only disease where you're a better person after you had it than before you have it. And the miracle of recovery for so many people that are out there. We're so grateful for you. Thank you so much, Patrick. That's great. Thanks for everyone listening in and watching at home. We took back 420 today with some truth bombs, which was great. So thank you so much for joining us. Check out our podcast, the new podcast, High Stakes with Kevin Sabet. You can download it and subscribe on Spotify or your favorite podcast service. Also, check out the new film, THC Inc., out today on Documentary Plus, Apple TV, Roku, and other streaming services online as well. And then we also want to invite you to join us at our summit, our 2027 SAM Good Drug Policy Summit that we're doing in partnership, again, with our friends at CADCA. And you can check that out on our website, learnaboutsam.org. It'll be in early February. You won't want to miss it. Thanks so much, everybody.